Today we're still reading the foundation of Buddhism. We're going to start for the chapter 2, right? And in chapter 2, I hope today we are going to finish. There was subtitle. One is the Dharma, text, practice, and realization, and the other one is the first recitation of scripture, the four Nikayas, so Agama and the Vinaya. Okay, and I think the best to left the other one that on page 45, Sutra and Abhidhamma for the next discussion, because I think that is more complicated. I mean, at least to my understanding. Okay, and especially because most of people, even they learn Buddhism, so and the Abhidhamma, whenever I ask people, do you know Abhidhamma, people really get confused. They never heard about the term even. But actually that belongs to one of the canon of the Buddhism. I would say one of the most important canon that influenced all Buddhism in the later period. Okay. Anyway, so without delay, we can just back to the page. Sorry, that would be page 35 on the original book, and then the chapter is about the word of the Buddha. I think because the first chapter was about the Buddha, and then now this is about the Dharma, basically. And then here we're discussing about the word of the Buddha. Actually, in the academic study, like maybe almost 10 years ago, it was a really hype topics for how do you define the word of the Buddha. But this is not the academic class, so, and actually if you are really good at it and you need to write a lot of, and even I present one of the paper on that you need to present the paper how to define the word of the Buddha, because there was so many discussion on in academic. You cannot say because that's the word of Buddha in academic. You need to prove what do you mean by that, and how do you understand by that. But I think Rupert deal with the subject delicately, and then it doesn't mean that he's not doing academic in a way, in a strong sense, but then he's still, because of the academic, after the academic kind of training, he really knew that there were lots of discussion going on about the word of Buddha. So that's why I value his book very much, because it's not like just writing a book. Then you could, especially when you're in an academic field, then you definitely know when he writes a book, he has so many things in his head. And he tried to solve the problem in some way too. And then still, the book based on the early teachings first, many from Pali first, and to understand how we look at it, And people could argue that also. If you have questions after all this discussion, you're always welcome to ask. I'm not here to give you an answer, but at least give you some way of thinking, All right, why don't we just start now? That's the title is The Word of the Buddha, Buddhist Scriptures and Schools. Okay, so in other words, when we talk about school, it's really, really big topic. Now we under one of the very easier subtitle first, Dharma, text, practice, and realization. So please understand that this is, when you put the word Dharma, and there's regard to the text, regard to the practice and realization, okay, with regard to these three things. And now he's going to put a kind of nicely arrange it to let people understand what the Dharma, at least in general, how Buddhism understands the word Fa, Dharma. Okay. Which side like to read first, left or right? So if you're left-winged or right-winged. We don't have the middle path there. I think maybe let front start, maybe easier. Okay, so then the left start, right? To my side is left wing, but to your side maybe the right wing. So,
Dharma, text, practice, and realization. The Buddha is author of no book or treatise. Moreover, it is extremely unlikely that any of his immediate disciples wrote anything of his teaching down. And yet we are told that the Buddha devoted some 45 years of his life entirely to teaching, and that by the end of his life he was quite satisfied that he had succeeded in passing on his teaching carefully and exactly, such they would long be of benefit and help to the world. This states of affair is worth reflecting on, for it reveals something of the nature of the Buddhism.
All right, okay, thank you. I guess that's the main point. We note, at least everybody agree that the Buddha spent 45 years, or at least more than 40 years, to his entire life to teaching, okay? It is really, if you compare to other religions, it's really quite different, I know. And think about even the time period that Buddha has spent, okay? And the other religion might be just spent few years, whatever. And then the other thing is very important here to point out that he also quite satisfied that he has succeeded in passing on his teaching, You know, a lot of teaching, or if you compare, because if you study religions, I mean, any other religions, maybe there was some other religion say so, at least. And this is one of the religions that before the Buddha passed away, he definitely was satisfied that he had been able to passing on his knowledge to others, And this is a very important point, because if the Buddha say, I'm not very happy with all you guys, what you learn, right? And then he just passed away, then maybe that means he didn't learn anything important from the Buddha, But at least that's also one important point. And then not only that, is carefully and exactly, and then they would be long be benefit and helpful to the world. That's very important message. It's not important for the Buddha, okay? Please remember this message too. The Buddhist teaching is not about, we please the Buddha, so the Buddha were happy. I don't care whether the world people, whether the what we call the people in the world are happy. No, that's definitely is not the aim of Buddhism. The Dharma is that, at least to the Buddhist belief, that to the Buddha's belief that they will long be benefit and helpful to the world. Okay, and that's also one of the unique message too. So, all right, and let's read the next one and see what is some of the main point has been discussed or been said here. Okay, do you want to read? You want to pause? Okay, so okay.
Buddhism cannot be reduced to a collection of theoretical writing, nor a philosophical system of thought. Although both these form an important part of its tradition, what lies at the heart of Buddhism, according to its own understanding of the matter, is Dharma. Dharma is not an exclusively Buddhist concept, but one which is common to Indian philosophical, religious, social, and political thought in its entirety. According to Indian thought, Dharma is that which is the basis of things, the underlying nature of things, the way things are. In short, it is the truth about things, the truth about the world. More than this, Dharma is the way we should act. For if we are to avoid bringing harm to both ourselves and others, we should strive to act in a way that is true to the way things are, that accords with the underlying truth of things. Ultimately, the only true way to act is in conformity with Dharma.
Okay. We know that, in the Buddhism, when you say about, let's say even you take three refuge to the Buddha, refuge to the Dharma, right? And what does it mean by the Dharma? So, well, I guess here, at least he put it one thing first. We should understand, from the, or you could say that the general concept in India, what does a Dharma mean? Okay, the main thing I would say that Dharma is the way we should act. I mean, this is how Indians understand. But even though if you speak Indian language, any kind of dialect in India, you say, I will just follow the Dharma. Maybe you sound like, maybe for your guy, you are, if I say that Chinese, maybe you say, 我就跟随着法. So it depends. But I think for Chinese, maybe if you say, I will follow the Dharma, you might be thinking that means the Buddha Dharma. I mean, when you say fa, it's very natural. We think it like a Buddhism. I'm not saying that it's not, but if you talk that way, say, I will follow the Dharma to Indian guy, they might think in the Indian way too. But anyway, Dharma is a language in India. It's commonly believed that something good, that something you should add with the good. But how you define the goodness of the, then definitely there's might have a little different. So I'm not here to discuss that at the moment. But I mean, put just one example. Here I didn't mention it, but I could just say one example. Like in Indian, they have one of the very famous Indian texts called Bhagavad Gita. I mean, Chinese translate as a 破戒反之歌. Very funny, even in earlier time when that was being translated into Chinese, a lot of people took that because it's right the word 破戒反. You know, 破戒反 is Bhagavad. In Chinese also, some people take that as a Buddha, 破戒反嘛. Because some translation of the Bhagavad is mean 破戒反. You know the Buddha has 10 names. And even in Taiwan, it happened in earlier time, they took that as the Buddhist text. Because they saw, oh, there's a 破戒反之歌, mean the Buddha's song, something like, the hymn of the Buddha. Anyway, like that, from the Bhagavad Gita is one of the very epical, very important, like religious Indian text. And especially if you learn Sanskrit, it's almost like when you learn Sanskrit, it's almost a text you have to go through. Don't tell me that you never read the Bhagavad Gita, you learn Sanskrit, then you definitely, you are not the people who learn Sanskrit. I mean, especially the so-called Indian Sanskrit. And there, they have a different way of understanding. For example, when the Arjuna was having one of the prince having a conflict whether they want to kill the opposite side of enemy. Why they want to kill the opposite side of enemy? Anyway, why he was hesitating to kill the opposite side of the enemy? Because all opposite side of the enemy were his relatives. Brother, half sister, and so forth. But then the heavenly God appear. That's what believed to be, what do you call? Shiva? No, not Shiva. Krishna. Krishna. And then appear and then say that, you have to follow your Dharma. Here, follow Dharma here means you have to follow your duty. And then your duty is because you are as a warrior. So, yeah, warrior, if you know that this is righteousness you need to do, even though they are your relative, close family, or so forth, you still have to kill it. Of course, that's maybe have a different opinion from Buddhism, but I want to say the word Dharma it was there. Okay, and in any way, in Indian concept, when you use a Dharma, I mean, it always represents something righteous, something new, something good, something righteous. Maybe when you talk about immorality and ethical discussion, then definitely they might have a little difference between the Buddhism. I remember when I was in university the first year, there was one other topic you need to learn. You need to defend how Buddhism think about Dharma. And because when you learn the Indian philosophy, that's how they think about Dharma, and whether the Buddhism has a complete same understanding from the ethical perspective, that they should kill for that instance, whether the Buddha was agree and disagree. But it's fine, you could say agree, you could say disagree, but you need to justify why you agree or why you disagree, okay? Anyway, we should understand the Dharma means something that is true to the way things are, and also it's also ultimately the only true way to act is in conformity with Dharma. Okay, that's very important. Okay. So let's just go on see what the notion of Dharma in Indian thought and how the Buddhists understand in a certain way. Yeah. You want to read? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. The notion of Dharma in Indian thought thus has both a descriptive and prescriptive aspect. It is the way things are and the way to act. The various schools of Indian religious and philosophical thought and practice all offer slightly different visions, darsana, of Dharma. Different visions of the way things are and the way to act. Of course, when we examine the teachings of various schools, we find that there is often substantial common ground and much borrowing from each other. Yet the Buddha's vision and understanding of Dharma must be reckoned to have had a profound influence on Indian culture, and to an extent unparalleled by other visions of Dharma, on cultures beyond India.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I mean, we must understand, at least even in India also, when you say the notion of Dharma, so it mostly has a both descriptive and a prescriptive aspect. Okay, So one is that basically we discuss what the things are, Dharma. And the other is that kind of like what is the something you should be act in the correct way. It's more like a morality kind of thing, you know, moral or obligation. And the other is more like a philosophical too, you know. Yeah. And then also, but we also bear in mind, because Buddhism actually been in India for a long time, even like a karma. Even nowadays, some people in India explain the karma almost like Buddhism. And they thought that was Indian, actually. When I say Indian, they thought that was like the Indian religion origin, and that was not true. But they were highly influenced by the Buddhist concept already. So, and they also borrow a certain idea, and, you know, India religion itself, you know. Okay, so, okay, let's just read next one and see. The Buddha regarded the Dharma he had found as what, you know. No, I didn't print that out.
He had found as profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, sublime, beyond the sphere of mere reasoning, subtle, to be experienced by the wise. Thus, knowledge of Dharma is not something that is acquired simply by toldness, by being told
the necessary
information or by reading the appropriate text. Knowledge of Dharma is not a matter of scholarly and intellectual study. This does mean that such study may not have a part to play, yet it can never be the whole story. In fact, according to an ancient authoritative view of the matter, knowledge of Dharma comes about as a result of the interplay between three kinds of understanding.
Prajna,
that which arises from listening.
Sruta,
that which arises from reflection. Chinta, that which arises from spiritual practice. Bhavana, the aim of Buddhism is to put into practice a particular way of living the holy life or spiritual life. Brahmacharya, that involves training in ethical conduct, sila, and meditative and contemplative techniques, samadhi, and which culminates in direct realization of the very knowledge, prajna, the Buddha himself reached under the tree of awakening. Therefore, what the Buddha taught is often referred to in the early text as a system training, sikha, and his disciples may be referred as being in training,
Saisa,
or not in need of further training.
Saisa.
Thus, in certain important respects of nature, of the knowledge that the Buddha was trying to convey to his pupils is more akin to a skill, like knowing how to play a musical instrument, than a piece of information, such as what the time Manchester train leaves tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. And then now in general, how Buddhism understands the Dharma, okay, without denying what the general notion of the Buddhism, but more specifically, the Buddha always regarded Dharma as something that he had found as the profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, sublime, beyond the sphere of mere reasoning, subtle to be experienced by the wise. Okay. So we must understand, at least from a Buddhist perspective, when you talk about the Dharma, you cannot just only restrict it to more like the descriptive, way. Some people argue that maybe more on a prescriptive way as well. But anyway, I guess that's how in tradition, so we put it, the knowledge of Dharma has to come about from understanding, okay? But that understanding is, or you could translate as understanding, but some they can translate as wisdom, prajna, okay? And that the wisdom arises from, it has to become three-way. It cannot be just only one way. That is a sutta, jinda, and then bhavana. You know, the sutta mean by hearing. In those days was just only hearing, right? They don't have much printing thing. But you could say nowadays called reading and study, right? And then jinda is kind of reflection or pondering, okay? And the other one is that it has to be learned from the spiritual practice. So, or here it translates spiritual practice, but you could translate generally mean meditation also. But the word bhavana actually in Chinese called xing ma. So that's what we call the knowledge from three way, by hearing, by reflecting, and then by spiritual practices. Okay, or you could just say practices, or you could say meditation, depend how you like to translate that word. And then I guess another thing that the book trying to say, the Buddha reached that he understands the ultimate Dhamma, the ultimate truth, but you could say the ultimate law, you know, the ultimate law that will good for both sides, either the person himself and the other, or the society. And that require three kind of thing too. That means the morality, here they translate ethical conduct, right? And then also the contemplative technique, or you could say the samadhi, just sammei, Chinese usually translate. And also the wisdom too, the very knowledge, the prajna, the wisdom, or you could say the understanding, depend how you really translate. But the word is the same. Look at the word prajna, in Pali is panya, prajna, you know, mean the wisdom. So here I would say, actually he had fulfilling his training under the tree, and when he was sitting under the tree, right? It means that's very important. Even though it may be just few lines, a lot of people forgetting. Even though they follow Buddhism, they always thought, oh, they could learn something. But look at the Buddha. What did he do? He was just only spend a huge amount of time was just contemplating, right? Or you could say meditating. Okay. So and this is how something. I like to stress and again, because when I become a monk, there are so many ways saying that how you can get the Dhamma. You know, some teachers say you should go to study and you need to study very hard. Some teachers say you should meditate, don't do any other thing. And then some teachers say you could have to follow your Vinaya, that means your precepts very well. And you know, I also have to follow all these things. But ultimately, I'm not denying all this importance of those things, but then ultimately the deep realization is always when you can do meditation. Because whatever you learn is only second hand. But only when you do your meditation is a first hand thing. For example, you cannot meditate, it's also first hand thing. That because my mind is running away, fine. It's also, the truth is a Dhamma, right? If your mind don't run away, you won't have a Dhamma. You know, that's, the mind will run away is one of the Dhamma too, right? So, and because of running away, if you don't know how to control it, then you might be easy to be carried away by that too. Anyway, so, but that three kind of thing is very important. The samadhi, the sila, and prajna. Please remember those terms. I mean, those terms are very, very common. Some people write a book, they might have a different translation because they don't know, everyone have different translation of the word. So, but they always, if they are good writer, they always put a bracket because they want to tell you originally that's the word. Just in Chinese, sila is mean 戒嘛, and then the siksha, the samadhi is mean the 定嘛. Sometimes they translate as 定, but or you could say just say 三昧, or 三摩地. And then the prajna is always translated as a 慧, 戒定慧. Okay. If you have any question about the term in Chinese, please ask me too. Okay. And also, not only that, but actually, therefore, what the Buddha taught is often referred to the early text as a system of training. Okay, system of training, 识 or 学, 我们叫学习的学, that means training. And his disciple may be referred to as being in trend or not in trend. Okay, so called 识有学跟无学. Okay, do you know the term? 有学跟无学 mean in training or not in training. So let me just ask a question. Who are the person who are in training, who is not in training? Let me write Chinese first. 有学无学. Because I'm on here, my Chinese will be much even worse. Anyway. Okay.
Maybe those who take the refuge are the ones who's in training. And those who have not taken the refuge have not started their training.
I'm sorry, wrong answer. Anyone?
Or sainthood.
Yeah. Nowadays maybe we don't have this really such a high demand, but during the Buddha's time, when you say someone is in training, mean someone had reached to the first sainthood, up to the third sainthood, because they still have to be repeat and have to be learn and learn. They might be learning the same thing, but they have to be more subtle and more refined. Have to be more refined in their practices. And then the Wuxue is only referred to the Arahant or the Buddha or someone who complete cut off the reincarnation. Just Arahant is called Wuxue, it's not in training. Otherwise, whenever you read any Mahayana text or even any text, when you read Wuxue, it refers to they are not Arahant yet, but they are not normal people also. Who are the normal people? Anyone? Even though it's not in the text, but I would like to know. Anyone know the Sanskrit? I'm sure you might not know the Sanskrit, but at least Chinese.
Upasika.
Huh?
Upasika.
No, Upasika you cannot say. Upasika can be in training.
Oh, yeah.
No, Upasika means 居士, but 居士 could be in training. Yeah. Who are the people definitely is not in training or even not in training? What we call the normal folk in Chinese. Yeah, 凡夫 is one of the term. Yeah. Any?
Arya.
Huh? No, Arya. No. Arya is son. Arya. No. Arya is not. Arya always either in training or not in training. No. Arya, whenever you put this word, I mean, not strictly speaking, but mostly when you put this word, it's either in training or not in training. No.
How about Zhongshen?
The Zhongshen is just a normal being, but the Zhongshen it could be in training or not in training, or even nothing, nothing attainment. It's all right. Just leave it here first, okay? Just know, but yeah, 凡夫 is one of the term, okay? No, the 问题是在中文里面有学跟无学都是圣者，但是如果不是圣者，在佛教一般用哪个字？就是凡夫嘛 ，is one of the word。还有啦，其实 ，okay。众生 no， 众生 is refer to everyone。It could be 众生 is mean the beings, all beings. All beings refer to anyone, everyone. Yeah. Okay. Now let's go the next one. Unless anything that wanted to add that comment? Any? No. Okay. We can just finish that first. Yeah. Next one. Yeah. That knowledge.
The knowledge of Dharma was conceived of in this way, expressed in part why the written word was not originally the medium for its communication. Practical training is difficult to
impart
and acquire simply on the basis of the theoretical meaning. One needs a teacher who can demonstrate the training and also comment on it, and encourage one in one's own attempts to put the instruction into practice. In fact, a sense that knowledge is not properly communicated by the written word colors the traditional Indian attitude to learning in general. Knowledge must be passed from teachers to pupil directly. This does not mean that at the time of the Buddha, Indians had no literature. On the contrary, in the form of the
Greek,
Veda, India has a literature that predates the Buddhas by perhaps as much as 1,000 years. But this literature is oral, It was composed orally, memorized, and then passed from teacher to pupils directly by a process of oral recitation for centuries. Without ever being committed to writing, Indian is, of course, not the only culture to have an ancient oral literature. The Iliad and the Odyssey, for example, grew out for a tradition of oral composition. Yet the oral origins of traditional Indian learning continue to inform its structure long after texts had begun to be committed to writing.
Okay, all right, yeah. I don't think I have anything to add here. Yeah, can we go to the next one, next paragraph? Yeah.
In presenting its teachings to the world, the Buddhist tradition would thus point towards an unbroken lineage or succession of teachers and pupils. Just as the Buddha took care to instruct his pupils, so they in turn took care to instruct theirs. The visible and concrete manifestations of this succession is in the first place the Sangha, the community of ordained monks, bhikkhu, and nuns,
bhikkhuni.
Becoming a Buddhist monk or nun requires a particular ceremony that is legitimate only if properly carried out according to the prescribed rules, which is apparently go right back to the time of the Buddha himself. In particular, the prescriptions for the ceremony require the presence of a minimum of 5 fully ordained bhikkhunis.
No, not bhikkhus, bhikkhus.
Of at least 10 years.
Because bhikkhunis is a female nun, so, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Bhikkhus. Of at least 10 years standing. Thus, when someone ordains a Buddhist monk, there is in effect a direct link back to the presence of the Buddha himself. Of course, the principle of the passing of the teachings directly from person to person may also operate outside the Sangha. For members of the Sangha do not only teach other members of the Sangha, they teach lay people as well. Yet the Sangha remains a tangible thread of the tradition.
Okay. Anything to comment? Question? No? No? Okay.
Is there anything why they want to be like at least 5 people in the
The ceremony. The ceremony, let me look at it. The ceremony, what is the question of the ceremony?
Is it like why need like at least, you know, like minimum
10 years.
5?
10 or 5.
5 people. Is there any reason for that, or is it?
I think it, I don't know. When I say I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure, but I think that was, it just passed out the way. But I guess you cannot say, you know, because you have been ordained as a 10 years already and a monk, and then you have a new student without agree by the other, and then you just say, okay, I want to have my student and by one, and it doesn't, you know, in a way when you have a new student, you've been agreed by the other too, thinking that they are mature enough to accept as being the student there, right? It's same as like you open a university or institute, you are not going to say, I will just approve you to be my student without telling the other. You might be arguing, you know, I want him, so please accept them, you know, him as a student too, right? I guess that. And it might be a way to show this more democratic, you know. I think Buddhism is always very, very actually open. Definitely Buddhism is not allowing this authoritative idea, you know, always. I'm not talking about in the later on what happened, but you know, in institution in Buddhism is always, you know, always had to be chosen by among the others who will be the, you know, the leader who will be, you know, going to do that. Okay. And here also, please also understand when you say the bhikkhu, it means the fully ordained one. It's not about a novice. You could novice mean anyone who is under 20 years old in the old day. Who is under 20 years old, or who is maybe just not fully ordained. They just wanted to be, you know, like what we call the sami or samini, sama, or what we call the samanera or samaneri in original language. So, and you don't have to be agreed by the 5. to help this legitimate kind of ordination process. All right. Okay. Next one. Do you want to read that? So the Buddhas.
So the Buddha's Dharma is mediated to us with the Sangha, a community that ideally does not merely hand down some
vague
recollection of what the Buddha thought, but actually lives the teaching. In the Pali commentaries written down in Sri Lanka in the 5th century CE, a distinction was made between two kinds of monastic duty, that of books and that of practice. The former is concerned with the study of the theory as preserved in Buddhist writings. The latter is the straightforward attempt to put the Buddha's system of training into practice, to live the spiritual life as prescribed by the Buddha and his followers. Although this former distinction is found in the writings of a particular Buddhist school, the point being highlighted holds good for Buddhism as a whole. Throughout the history of Buddhism, there has existed a certain tension between the monk who is a great scholar and the theoretician, and the monk who is a realized practitioner. Something of the same tension is indicated in the 6th and 7th centuries in China with the arising of the Qian, Japanese Zen school of Buddhism, whose well-known suspicion of theoretical formulations of the teaching is summed up by the traditional stanza. A special tradition outside the scriptures, not founded on words and letters, pointing directly to the heart of man, seeing into one's own nature and attaining Buddhahood. I have to.
No, you have to finish that next one too. The same kind of tension. Oh, no, because that's still in the same paragraph, right? There's no space left on there. Did you see that?
The same kind of tension is in part reflected in a triple characterization of Dharma itself as texture, tradition, pariyatti, practice, patipati, and realization, pativatta.
No, where?
Okay.
Patipata.
Once again, found in the Pali commentaries, the first refers to the sum of Buddhist theory as contained in Buddhist scriptures. The second to the putting into practice of those teachings, while the third to the direct understanding acquired consequent upon the practice. The rest of this chapter will primarily be concerned with Dharma as textual tradition.
Okay, good. Right. I think here, I guess Rupert in his book trying to say that yes, in Sri Lanka actually, after basically during the 5th century, there was a tradition discussion about there were two ways of studying the Dharma, and one is called pariyatti, one is called patipati. That's why here it translates the term. Let me see. He say that is the. One is concerned with the study of the theory as preserved in Buddhist writing, and the latter is the straightforward attempt to put the Buddha's system of training into practice, to live the spiritual life as prescribed by Buddha and his followers. But still, actually, this kind of trend, it's happening in all, in the Theravada Buddhism too. I mean, lots of people think people who study Pali Buddhism and the monks, they will do the spiritual practice, and nobody would deny they are not. No one will say, I'm not doing the spiritual practice. But put in a strict sense, when you say this is what we call the practice, Bati on a textual tradition called Bariyating. Still, we are still in that tradition. They have a huge, actually, how to say, huge what? There's huge distinction among them. Okay, they still have a huge distinction among them. For example, usually if you are pay too much attention only on study, and then when you go for meditation, they say you spend too much time on your just study. That's why when you do meditation, you have so many thoughts in your head, and you are not really put into practice. And then when you go to a place that's not necessarily agree with you to do meditation, then they ask you not to do meditation more than 30 minutes a day. And then they thought if you do too much of meditation, you get headache, you know. And they put their argument believing that, I mean, this is not necessarily in academic, but it's definitely is life there. It's like, you know, some they believe that, you know, you could just study, and then from the study perspective, and you could also able, when you have a good chance, you will be able to gain enlightenment also, okay? But to be honest speaking, this is just my opinion, even though they say that, but they also know that if not meditation well, it's very hard to do so. But they would not admit it. It just become a very common norm. That also happened because why? Because in the Theravada Pali system, especially, I'm not going to address other system already, even they have the same thing, but I'm not going to talk about them because I have no right to talk about them because I was not really in that environment for a very long time. But even that like that, it's because when they were young, like a kid, you know, like if they, you know, now in old days especially, now even maybe getting less and less, that a lot of young kids, you know, they were sent to the temple to become a monk. For many reasons, some because their parents like it, but most of the reason in those days, in old days especially, because they were poor and they have no way to give the kids education. But the only way to give education is to send them to the temple. They will have better food, you know, and they will look after from the, you know, the Greek master, and then basically they have a lot of friends because of many monks there. Usually, actually, if you are the kids, some kids, they go to temple, they love to stay in a temple because, no, I mean, so many friends. You know, when you go there were 20 kids there around you, of course, but they do have the hardship life too, you know. But then they were sent to the school, and imagine that you were sent to a school from the early age, and then you've been study for 10 years, 20, almost 15, 20 years. When you grow up, and then they say, oh, and in the school usually, there was as I say, there was a tension between the two, unfortunately, I think. Unfortunately, there was tension between the two. So if you say that I want to go to meditate, I mean, there were some teachers encourage you, but most of the teachers don't. I have to say one example, like when I taught in Taiwan, and then suddenly the college there have a kind of a trend, or kind of what to call, I forgot the English term. It's like kind of like, anyway, affection, kind of faction that people started to go to meditate, even though in earlier time it was not very popular there. And then they asked me, say, teacher, could you tell me, should I go to meditate or should I go to school? Should I continue to study in the college now or should I go to meditate? I told them, I said, you know, you asked the wrong person. Firstly, I'm a teacher here. I couldn't tell you should go to meditate, and then I would be fired, you know. But then secondly, I would say, but you know, especially if you are not really good at the teachings too, and if you go to abroad, another country, if you do meditate, you don't have a very good background knowledge, sometimes it takes longer time for you to understand the meditation technique also. But of course, I'm addressing it because that those people in those days, they want to go to the Pali country, I mean the Pali Buddhist country, like a Theravada country, to learn meditation. Then I told them, then if you really wanted to, you know, you need to finish your education, because one important thing, education is not that I wouldn't say no, but one important thing is because you are here already, don't just give up everything. You know, just few years, finish your education well, and you know, make sure that you learn well and what you should learn. But anyway, That's a tricky point. I told them you need to learn some other this kind of text first, even though maybe school give you other thing, but you need to learn those texts. Otherwise, when you go there, still you don't know what they are talking about, So like that. So it's really have this kind of tension. I want to point this out because let people study, understand also. Don't think that this tension is not there. It's there. And of course, in the 5th century, when it was described, I guess is a way to encourage. They have to try to memorize the text, or memorizing is very important, and try to study the text, and also very important to do the practice. But then the history goes on. It's always a debate, which is more important, For example, in Sri Lanka, as one example, like just happened in the last century, when Sri Lanka was under few of the countries' colonization, and the last colonization was a British colonization, of course. And that time, actually, the Christianity was trying to really become the country religion, and they always believe that this Asia religion, especially the Southeast Asia religion, are like a barbarian religion, right? And imagine they always think there are no culture and this barbarian religion. And when they try to convert them, so then one of the monks who was actually because it was during this Holland colonization, he started to learn because he was like kind of, the missionary tried to supply a lot of goods for them. So anyway, somehow he go to like a Christian school to study too. So he had the fortunate to have a better education. Then anyway, when the Britain trying to kind of almost there's a new that they try to kind of like change the religion, like Christianity as kind of nation religion. So he opened up the debate, our culture, And he was very brave. He said, I would debate with, you set up one of the best of the missionary. I would debate with them. If my debate was win, then you cannot do this thing. You cannot thinking that the Christian is better than the Buddhism. So basically, he was, that's why if you go to Sri Lanka, you still can see the monk statue. He was standing there and he was stepping on the British flag. Because of course the 4 days debate, I think it's 4 days, I forgot, he won at the end. So, and because firstly he have a good knowledge of Bible, and then of course then definitely he has good knowledge of Buddhism. So this is not just about you have a good knowledge of yourself, you must have a good knowledge of other side too, so that you know what they are talking, and so that you could put forth your debate. Anyway, because of that reason also, and after the Buddhism revived in Sri Lanka, and then they want to try to discuss the whole big Sangha. Sangha means the community were trying to think which one is the best. What is the best thing we need to promote? Because you cannot start to promote things two-sided. And then either what we call the practice first, or the textual tradition should be put in the main thing. Then after the long debate among the community, the monk community, and then they think must learn the textual tradition first. And that's why, and then in Sri Lanka is very famous for study the textual tradition, because they think that without the ground of textual tradition, because in the modern time, just say even last century, it's almost like the modern time. Lots of people say, oh, I have a realization. And then they say, how do I know whether you're a realization? Without the textual understanding, how can I know whether you really realize, you have your realization is the true Dharma, something like that. Only I could prove it from when I have a well-learning of teachings, I can question you, I can ask you, and then with at least my rational understanding, at least you could answer my questions, then I could say, oh, maybe yeah, something like that. So that was one of the main key points they put forth, that should learn first and then to practice, okay? But there's a good side or bad side of it, of course, later on, Anyway, just want to say the historical reasons, so. But then in a certain country, like in Thailand, but they don't have that kind of history. They don't have that problem because Thailand never been colonized. They're very strong. When the British came, they defeat them. When the Japanese came, they defeat them also. So the Thailand still retain more in a certain That's why the Thai people are also very proud of themselves, because they think even the Buddhism system itself, they are more like, you know, not having a big influence by the foreign countries like that. You know. And Burma, of course, also, even though Burma was colonized by Britain, but in Burma, however, because they, I think their Sangha system is very strong in academic as well, you know. And anyway, that's another story. But I just want to say, this debate is always happen, whether the practice should be regarded as the most important and the textual tradition. So I think why the Rupert want to put it here, it just carry a certain message to let people know. Even this, how these terms come. You know, there's a term called Pariyati and Patipati, means the textual tradition or the practice. We'll come to page 38, paragraph 3. Okay. So, and then also, of course, idealistically, that is mean you must know the text, Pariyati, and you must also do the practice and then the realization. Practice is not enough, but you must have the realization. That's called Pativeda. Okay. In Chinese, usually translate as 通达而已. Okay. Okay. Pativeda. Okay. All right. If any other questions there, anything, anyone want to comment? Any comment? No, I don't want to translate again. Maybe you have to pay me later. Try to learn English. You know, one day you might want to speak to the kids in English too. Then that's how you talk in English.
It's hard to even speak in Chinese about the Buddha
teachings.
Dharma.
That's right. Actually, this is why if you learn another language, sometimes it helps you to understand the teaching more directly.
Okay, let me try. Just like you always use a sample. If you don't know how to swim, then you just talk about the swim. Then you never know how to swim. So just apply to this subject. Then how can you learn by texture, and then you can be a teacher without practice?
No, this is why, I mean, okay, this is just my understanding. It doesn't represent everybody. This is why I said when you study in a class, I always say we are in a class now, and this is more like a discussion, more like a academic study, or you know, and just like we are actually having a class almost like talking about the theory of swimming. You know, how they swim, why these people can swim fast, who win the first swimming. Right, we need that knowledge to become inspired. You're right, and then but then definitely I will also encourage people have to go to start to swim. That is what I mean by the practice. You need to go to do meditation, even you are not doing very well, but if you are still practicing it, you are swimming. Kind of like you don't necessarily swim well like Michael Field, yes, you don't necessarily swim like him, but you know you are swimming now. And that's why whenever there's a time I teach meditation, I ask people, forget about whatever you learn. Not that you cannot think about it, but when you're doing swimming, do it first, and then you can discuss. Say, you know, I learned that swimming should be this way, but why you teach that way? That's fine, you could ask. But when you're doing swimming, you don't think that. You just swim, you know. You just follow and swim. You might not agree with because I also learned swimming from different coaches, even though my swimming is so bad, you know. And different coach teach differently also, a little different, you know, if you look at it, you know. So that is what is, but now, if you ask me why I'm more emphasis nowadays, more swimming than your reading, not that because I think reading and study is not important, it's because there are so many of reading there and less people are doing swimming itself. That was only the reason, okay. If nowadays, everybody just swimming and then they don't learn, and I will ask them, you should go to learn. Because that's learning give you a lot of tips there also, and a lot of exploration. You know, even when you learn something, you don't learn that limit. If you are good at it, when you're just like swimming, when you're good, you learn those little tips and to be more, I don't know, more fun, maybe you could say, and become more proficient also. Yeah. Okay.
Would you agree to some kind of group? They kind of said, if I fully understand what the Buddha said, that shows me is enlightened. So would you agree with that? Or?
I don't know. I'm now more very skeptical about those things because firstly, my understanding of the Buddha's teaching is that no one will say, I know the Buddha's teaching. And if they directly tell you that way, I think usually we are quite suspicious because what we understand from the Buddha Dharma, now we're back to the word Dharma, a person who really have that kind of realization must be very humble. They rather let you not to know than they let you know, right?
Because it's a conflict to say if you, because you already said in very beginning said, Dharma is acting.
It's an act, yeah.
Act,
yeah.
right?
But that's what we call a prescriptive perspective. It's an act, but then you can understand that as a descriptive aspect too, from what we call the descriptive perspective. The descriptive aspect is the discussion. For example, even when you do meditation, you still have to discuss with some other people. How could you manage to do so? You say, oh, I do it this way. And I sleep less, and I maybe sometimes sleep more. That is also a kind of descriptive aspect of the Dharma, right? Or sometimes when I'm doing quite well, I will just not let myself lose my attention, for example. And what kind of factor I will do? I will start to eat less. I will start to do those are the descriptive perspective also. It's nothing wrong when you can have discussion on the teachings. But what I want to say is that never don't think that this, my point is, we are a little bit out of discussion, this topic, but still I want to say, I myself think that way. I don't ask you to have to believe me, but this is just through my whole life, my year. Ultimately, it's almost like if the death is one of the important things, not only death, even normal life. In other words, in your daily life, it requires you to swim a little bit. The theory is not sufficient to help you. I don't mean it doesn't help. It's not sufficient to help, I guess. At least to my understanding. I learned a lot of theory. This theory, that theory, this theory, that one. But ultimately, you need to learn how to train your mind to refine yourself and become a spontaneous kind of thing. Even though not spontaneous, but how to say? Yeah, become more habitual too, Just like if you imagine your life is always has to be facing to the water, then even though you try all the way around, go that way, but you still have to face to the water, then you must learn how to swim. Even though you might be just swim short, you after you swimming, crossing over, then you feel a little anxiety, whatever, but you're still doing it, I guess. Yeah.
Maybe instinctive. Instinctive?
Yeah, I would say instinctive. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's like a spontaneous kind of. Yeah. Okay. All right. And I would just want to say that because, as I say, the main thing is I always emphasize on the practice, not because I say only practice, no other side, but because my understanding is in the current situation, people who are learning Buddhism is only reading and reading and reading. And they think that once you understand the text, they thought they know it, But the Buddha, if that was the case, then definitely, I know that when you do math, maybe that's how you could believe it. And this is also one very tricky thing between the West religion, no, I won't say religion, the West philosophy. Because, for example, Plato believed that, even Aristotle also believed that when you're able to solve the math problem, you come to the truth, right? And definitely that was not the Buddhist understanding. The truth is, so that's why the theory of truth is huge in West discussion. But in the Buddhism, here defined very clearly that also always go with the discipline, and always go with the focus and the concentration, and as well as the wisdom. And the wisdom is always referred to the Buddhist teaching as the highest one. That is impermanence, the non-self, the suffering, or you could say the dukkha, and then the, what you call, even emptiness, as well as the, in other words, mean the Four Noble Truths, ultimately.